ago, in the wake of unthinkable violence against our children, we came together as a nation. And for a moment, we were united in action to protect our children. Let's find that unity again. Let's bring many voices together into harmony as one. Parent together.
Let's act now to end gun violence against children.
It starts at home, every home.
Communities in which our children's lives come first.
Parents united by love can overcome our differences.
Parents united by love can accomplish anything.
Parent together.
Parent together today.
That the latest attempt by the group Sandy Hook Promise, made up in part by Newtown parents who suffered so much loss exactly 11 months ago to the day, and they hardly alone. Brady Center also came out with a new ad. That is, they seek to push lawmakers to do something, to take any kind of action, with a not so subtle reminder that it is, after all, for the children.
Meet Mr. Bad Guy. He's done a lot of really bad things, but the one thing he's missing is a gun. Good thing a Brady background check blocks him from getting a gun at the gun store. No gun for you. But he's not gonna stop. He's a bad guy, not a quitter. So he goes online where he doesn't even need a background check to buy a gun. Score for Mr. Bad Guy. Easy peasy. And ta-da! Now he can do even badder bad guy things. And just think, 40% of gun sales have been just like this. Thousands every day. No Brady background check. So why won't Congress fix this? Maybe they're rooting for the bad guys. Tell Congress to stop helping bad guys get guns. Sign the petition to finish the job and demand Brady background checks on all gun sales. Easy peasy.
All right, two very different spots here, but you may say, why the coincidence of the timing now and why the reminders? Because, as we know, so little has really changed when it all comes down to gun violence these past 11 months. I'm not just talking about the lack of action in Washington, but of course, Andrew, here examples of this stuff playing out every day, and you see it in inner cities, you see it in suburbs, you see it in rural communities. Across this country, it spares no community, seemingly. You got example after example. You could go for the whole night here, but I guess just give the lowlights.
Yeah, Rich, and we start with another school shooting yesterday, and only got minor reporting for a couple of different reasons. 16-year-old student at a high school in Pittsburgh shot 3 students after school let out yesterday. The likely motive, revenge for a drug-related robbery last month, but still on school grounds. Another gun headline in Dallas last weekend, a gun control group meeting inside a restaurant, posting photos of a gun rights group that they suggested was harassing and threatening them. That group, shown here, assembled in the parking lot outside the restaurant and posed with a bevy of assault rifles, all of which, by the way, legal under Texas law. What's more, the group with the rifles says they were the ones who were wrong. But that last photo you looked at was sent around to make it look like they were in a threatening pose, when really this is them from the front. They were posing for a group photo. Notice, by the way, center of the photo, young child with his hand right on the assault rifle in the middle of your picture. The gun control group responding with this shot. Count the assault rifles if you can, maybe a dozen. You tell us, is it intimidation, a threat to the group meeting inside, or a peaceful demonstration of First and Second Amendment rights? So what has, as Rich asked, changed since Newtown 11 months ago today? The numbers. 30,375 people in the U.S. estimated dead from gun violence in that 11 months. And then there are the kids, 16,500 estimated shot since Newtown, 2,593 kids shot dead from gun violence since Newtown, and 1,731 kids murdered with a gun all since Newtown. And again, no federal laws have changed in that time. Rich, you asked me this morning, how many school shootings have we had since Newtown? The answer? It's hard to know for sure. Some reports 10, 14, 20. Maybe the real answer is, does a specific number really matter, Rich, when it comes to school shootings?
It's amazing. I'm curious around the table. There's two different approaches there that we saw in the ads. One had the Hollywood crew. I mean, I love the show Modern Family, and the whole cast seemingly showed up. And the other one was that cartoon, tongue-in-cheek, pointing out the flaws in how easy it is to get a gun. But to me, I think the mistake has always been the spot I would have rather have seen, where the families themselves, the real people, the moms and dads, the sisters, the brothers, the grandparents, who say, I don't have my loved one anymore. And this isn't some make-believe land. This could be you. Newtown can be any town in America. I've been to Newtown. It's a beautiful little community here. It's got a mixture of everything here. The faces of the parents with the American rainbow when you look at them. So that to me connects, I think, more. With all due respect, I mean, it was well-intentioned and everything, but I want to see real people. So anybody at the fence doesn't say, oh, that's Hollywood, or that's Mayor Bloomberg, or that's some silly cartoon. The real people, I think, convey, and it makes it harder for the other group to marginalize him or dismiss him one way or the other, because how do you say that to a parent who lost a kid whose only crime was going to school that day?
Well, it's difficult to use the real people because we're taught that it's not us. Again, so we assume that that can't be us. I'm sure that a lot of the people who are in Newtown never thought that that would come to their town. And nobody ever thinks that's going to happen. But eventually it happens in every town, and no one's immune from it. So it's a desensitization. We're desensitized. And what will happen is when you have a celebrity, you may reach someone that otherwise wouldn't be reached. And there may be someone who relates to the animation. But the bigger problem, I think you're right, is that we have to be able to have some empathy. And if we can realize that it shouldn't have to actually be me, I should not have to be the one who suffers in order for me to have compassion for people who have already suffered.
You know, I'm curious, man. When you were a prosecutor, was there a step in the process after a violent crime where if you were able to bring the public with you to see something, whether it's the family, the crime scene, the criminal process, where maybe some minds would change for people who say, you know what, bad people, guns, whatever?
Well, rarely. I mean, that is something that is definitely a tool, but it's rarely utilized by prosecutors. And one of the things, it's starting to be a bit more, and you can see it in drunk driving cases or texting while driving cases, where you'll have someone who's been a victim of that type of atrocity, and maybe they've lost a loved one or been significantly injured.
No, but I'm saying hypothetically, you can't do what I'm saying. But if the public actually could come along when there's a shooting or a violent action and actually see some of the consequences and the senselessness of it, do you think some minds would change?
Well, I think you can. I think if you look at what Mothers Against Drunk Driving is doing in terms of DWIs, they actually do. They go into the schools and they have mothers go in and say, this was my son, I've lost my son. This is my daughter, she's now disabled as a result of someone driving while they were on the telephone. So now once you see that, it's very powerful. I mean, you know, I can't text and drive now because I have somebody who I've actually met and I saw the consequences of it. I realize it's not a game. So those are the types of things. You can do that with shooting victims. We can do that across the board, and they're compelling people across the board, whether you're talking about arsons, you're talking about, I mean, we do it with bullying, right?
I hate to be so morbid, but what about the corpse? I mean, I worked in a lawyer's office when I was a teenager, and I saw some photos of a body that had been shot. I mean, it's as close as I've gotten.
You can
It's like you can't even, it's nothing like a movie, it's disturbing.
It is.
There's the privacy of it,
right.
But you know, you fill up Madison Square Garden twice almost, right? And that's what's happened since Newtown. I just don't know, we said it in the break, if after Newtown, where the whole country cried, right? And every parent went home and looked at their kids and held them tighter that night. And then we saw the little white coffins. That imagery will always stay with me. And you hear the stories, the heroic teachers who tried to do it for the kids, the parents who were totally destroyed from that night. And you heard the idiots from the LaPierres or whatever saying the tone-deaf, heartless stuff they said in the aftermath of it. And that can't change it, Dom. I'm not trying to be defeatist. You always guys make fun of me because I'm an eternal optimist about stuff. But if that can't change it, what can? Andrew can give out numbers all he can. I mean, he laid out compelling arguments about children, about people, about all that. But I just don't know what changes, commercials notwithstanding.
No offense, the numbers mean nothing. You're preaching to the choir. People watching right now, we all agree and sympathize with the numbers that Andrew gave out.
A little surprised, 30,000 people. Hasn't even been a year, Dom.
But at the end of the day, and I don't mean to sound negative, it really doesn't matter. Because until we break the NRA, notice I said we, until we break the NRA, nothing's going to change. And until you find a way to take some money back from politics. And what's the Supreme Court
promising to put his money where his mouth is and start funding some campaigns here.
Okay, but the Supreme Court is making it easier to put money into politics. So until those two things happen, Richard, We'll all be old men and old women covering this. I hate to say it. And hopefully it doesn't impact any of us, but it might.
But if you phrase it a little differently, if you say instead of just 30,000 people, going back to your analogy of Madison Square Garden, if you look and say, okay, we lost roughly 56 to 58,000 of the United States soldiers during a Vietnam War, you're telling me we've lost more than half of that number since Newtown.
Americans on American
Americans
soil.
on Americans. If that was someone from another country, we'd be at war right now. Okay,
But
so
you know-
when you
but
talk
you know
about
what the
terrorism,
NRA
we don't even.
But you know what the
Here's
NRA
point,
is going to say.
No, but and I know we got to hit it, but to Mayo's point, the marketing of this is, as silly as that sounds, matters. And those spots were fine, but they were forgettable, okay, at the end of the day, all right? But I will say, there was I saw this piece in the Times. We're hopefully going to be joined by this guest as early as tomorrow or certainly next week, which is guy comes back who deals with human epidemics, whether it's, name the disease, typhoid or whatever in developing nations around the world. These are epidemics. And what they try and do is they try and identify where it is, and then they try and identify the cause, but they treat it as an epidemic. He came back to Chicago, and instead of just doing the numbers like you said, they start to map it. And in these pockets, and you see where the kids are dying and the people are dying, in these particular pockets, you say, wait a second, this is an epidemic. If everybody all of a sudden died here from the Black Plague in these neighborhoods, we would have a national uprising. We would do something about it. NIH would be tasked to do nothing but to treat this. If we change at least how we perceive it, forget about the NRA, forget about whatever else. And to your credit, the Mothers Against Drunk Driving changed the way we think about drunk driving. It used to be a joke. People used to laugh about it in sitcoms, getting banged up and getting behind the wheel. I drive better drunk. People don't make those jokes anymore. It's not cool to be drunk, getting behind the wheel. The same thing, I think, hopefully, with texting. It's going to be, you attach punishment to it, and you attach a stigma to it. You do those things, we're not going to solve it. And there's going to be states that are as red as apples that are going to still do what they're going to do. But you do something about it, and maybe, just maybe more than those commercials, but that's the way we convey this. Okay, when we come back here, our guest here, and Dominic has been following this story from the very beginning, we're going to talk about what we learned today from the Attorney General in New York when it comes to stop and frisk. Some fascinating information. Regardless about how you feel about the program, I think no matter which side you stand on, you're going to be shocked at just how maybe ineffective this program's been when you see the black and white numbers. Stay with us.